What up, you guys? Rasati out here in Singapore, and as always, thank you so much for joining me on the Night Out podcast. You guys, tonight, I'm actually a little bit, I don't know, I'm a little bit on this side and on that side of the fence, mostly because I can see both sides, and that's the biggest damn problem. I think it's the reason I actually went to study psychology in the first place, because I do want to understand the antagonist and the protagonist. I want to understand both sides of view. I want to understand where they're coming from, why they do what they do. But that also makes it difficult for me to forgive both sides of the conversation and to allow them to realize that they are being held accountable, because I can understand, I can relate. So for this particular podcast episode, I kind of want to touch on the fact that, you know what, we got to cut our parents some slack. Seriously speaking, a lot of times we get into situations where we feel that our parents did us wrong. They did something that really, really affected us, right? And from our point of view, is valid. It happened. I know it happened. And from their point of view, sometimes it didn't happen. It didn't happen the way you remember it. It was completely something different. You imagine the whole thing. I never did that, whatever the case may be. But this is where it comes down to ego versus ego. And unfortunately, it is easier for the child to drop their ego than it is for the parent. And that's where most of the misunderstandings come in. I've had so many situations where I go to my mom trying to figure out, what happened? Like, why did you do this? Or why did things happen the way they did in my life? Like when I was younger or whatever. I'm trying to get insight. I'm trying to, make sense of the whole situation. Now that I'm older and I'm not so driven by the pain of whatever happened, I can maybe separate myself from that a little bit. So what I'm trying to figure out is, what exactly is going on? How does it, how did it all come together? What made it, occur the way that it did? And I'm hoping that she can give me some insight. But most times, unfortunately, for her side of things, she's forgotten what happened. She forgot that it even did happen. Maybe it was so traumatic for her, she blocked the entire episode out. She doesn't remember what she said to me. She doesn't remember, that maybe she hit me back then, or that she was so angry with me back then she stopped talking to me. Like whatever the case may be, she doesn't remember, which means I don't get any closure, which is what I'm looking for, right? But even then, I get offended at the fact that she would forget. Like, why would she forget me? This is a part of my life. She was present in that specific aspect of my life. How could she forget? How could she allow herself to forget? And now, even older than I was when I first asked her, I realized that there is no handbook. There is no right, wrong way to raise kids. It depends on the kid. It depends on the situation. It depends on your upbringing. How did your parents raise you? Like, you do what you know, right? We've talked about this so many times. But the question remains, at what point do you stop seeing your parents as people who should know better, who are older, that have way more experience, right? You hold them to a higher standard. You're expecting that they know what the hell to do and how to behave and how to appropriately, politically correct whatever, the behavior is. At what point do we stop seeing them as older or elder people that should know better and start seeing them as human who are capable of making mistakes? At what point do we change and see them that way instead? Because honestly speaking, they are the latter. Yes, they're meant to be wise beyond your years. They're meant to be people that can show you the path and guide you in such a way because they've lived more than you have. You're depending on the fact that they've lived more than you have. But at some point, they are still just human. There is no handbook. There is no rule book. There is no right way to do things. You kind of wing it. At what point do we stop seeing them as people who should know better and see them as people who did the best they could at the time? Now, the ego part is a little more difficult to deal with. I mean, let's face it, right? I want to preserve the fact that I think I'm a good person. And any belief that supports that I'm a good person, I'm with it. I'm cool with it. Any belief or memory that comes up that proves or disproves my theory that I'm a good person, I'm going to reject, possibly violently. I'm going to push away with all my might. I'm going to go, oh, no, that's not what happened because I'm a good person. And if that happened, that means I'm not a good person. And no, then that did not happen. I'm not taking that. That's not what happened at all. You remembered it wrong. That is not what happened. I never did that. I never said that. And you get these kinds of responses, which means you're further humiliated and further offended because the trauma itself is still not taken care of. And now it's adding to that trauma because adding insult to injury, they don't remember. They claim they never did it. You're not going to get the apology you're hoping for. But to that, I want to remind you guys, they are human. They are capable of mistakes. Now, They should be capable of admitting to their mistakes as well, but whether that happens or not is like a whole nother question. But if you can accept the fact that they made a mistake, then you are capable of also forgiving them for not knowing better at the time and making a horrible mistake and having hurt your feelings. And from there, at least start from someplace new. It wasn't easy for me. I used to throw the past in my mother's face all the time. I used to point out all the mistakes she made. And ultimately, what I wanted her to do was acknowledge that she did something wrong and apologize to me. I wanted her to know that, okay, yes, you hurt my feelings. And maybe you didn't intend to, but you did. Just say, yeah, it's possible I hurt your feelings. That's all I wanted to hear. But I also never heard that. Because for her to admit that means she would have to admit to herself that maybe she's not the person she thought she was. Her whole identity was built on this idea that she did the best she could and that was okay. And it still is okay. Even if you apologize to me, it doesn't make you less of a person. It just means that you love me enough to admit that, yeah, possibly you may have done something that hurt my feelings. So at that point, it's not something that takes you off your high horse. It's not something that knocks you down off your pedestal. But it does make you even more human and makes me relate to you a little bit more, that we can mend a fence, because I suddenly see that, okay, you're capable of admitting that you can be wrong. You're capable of being mature about this. Trust me, as much as our parents are able to handle, like business-wise or with other people, when it comes to their own sense of self, a lot of us turn into little kids. A lot of us. I'm a mom, you guys. I'm a daughter, I'm a mom. I turn into a little kid sometimes when my daughter tells me, hey, you're not doing this right. And then I get it from the other side. Hey, you're not treating her right. My mom would tell me. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? Both of y'all ganging up on me. What the hell? I thought I was a good mom. Or I have like a stranger come talk to me about, how I might be screwing up my kid because I allow them to do this or I speak to them this way and it's hurting their feelings. They can see it for themselves. I would like to think that I'm doing okay. Because as it is, I beat myself up about the millions of ways I could be screwing her up. As much as I would like to not be my mom, and I'm not, I still might be screwing her up. And at which point, when she becomes a teenager, she's going to throw it in my face and I'd be like, oh, I never did that. Or I hope I don't, but it's possible. And we repeat the cycle again. I wish there was a way for us to constantly see everyone as human. But for some reason, wherever emotions are involved, it means you're emotionally invested. It means you care about the outcome of the situation. It means you have a specific outcome you're looking for, which means you're not really open to the possibility that you also may be wrong. Maybe you interpreted it in a way that was not how it was intended. And even though your interpretation is still valid, it also means that their interpretation is also valid. Now, denying that something ever happened, that's not what I'm looking for. But saying that, okay, I was doing the best I could, I was trying to do this, like, not to justify, but to explain maybe, I could be down with that. I had a conversation with somebody today, and they were just distraught. They've been on medication since they were a teenager. They've been trying their level best to kind of reconcile and make peace and start from someplace new. But like I did, they have questions that need answering. They need to know why. They need to know if back then they were important or not. They need to know if they caused the problems that happened or they didn't. They need to know that when you called them names or described them in a less than kindly manner, or if you cut them off or shoved them aside or pretended they didn't exist or ignored the hell out of them, whatever, that you did it for a reason. That there was some logical explanation for why things happened the way they did. And it's not like one of those Area 51 mysteries. But at the same token, when we go to approach these people looking for answers, chances are they don't remember. Chances are they don't want to remember. Chances are bringing up that memory brings up other memories. Chances are they were the bad guy in that moment and they don't want to revisit that because they've tried so hard to make amends since then. But in order for some of us to get closure, we need to revisit those pains. We need the person around us that caused us pain to revisit it with us so we can understand better. Ultimately, though, as a young person speaking to our parents' generation, we have to accept the fact that sometimes the apology we want so desperately is not going to happen. because they're so wrapped up in their ego. They're so wrapped up in this sense of self that they have that may not have anything to do with who they were back then, but they still don't know how to differentiate. They still don't know how to like pigeonhole that version of themselves, like, the 1.0 version versus the 5.0 now, and forgive themselves as well as apologize to you for what 1.0 did. You may never get that apology. You may never get that acknowledgement. But this is why I want you guys to really try hard to see your parents or see the offending party as human and capable of making mistakes, rather than an authority figure who should know better. Because even though I know better, I still screw up. Even though I know I shouldn't yell at my daughter, and I shouldn't use demeaning words, and I shouldn't call her name sometimes, I do. Of course, I apologize for it right away because I realize the error of my ways, but that isn't to say that I don't fall into that trap first and then have to apologize my way out. And no, I'm not apologizing just to get her off my back. I'm apologizing because I realize how painful it was when it happened to me, and I can't believe that I slipped and fell into that rut my damn self, knowing better and all. Sometimes these behavior patterns are so rooted in our childhood, we've done them so many times, it's such a well-worn path that we forget and go that route because it's easy. It's what we know. Our nervous system knows it very well. It's the simplest reaction. It's the most common reaction that we've used. And as much as I would like to say I know better, and as much as I can be self-aware and know when I'm headed down that path, sometimes I can't stop it. Sometimes I can, and I'm very successful. Sometimes I can divert and change directions, on the fly and all of that. And sometimes I can't. So coming from monkey in the middle here, where I have a daughter and I have a mother, and I've fought with both, and I've had both of them fight with me, I'm telling you, sometimes the only way through a difficult situation where you're trying to patch things up with someone you've had a very traumatic past with, sometimes the best way to do that is to take the high ground, is to remember or keep in your mind the fact that these people are human and they are capable of making mistakes. And like any person who does not like their mistakes being pointed out, they're very capable of hiding their mistake or justifying their mistake or pretending the mistake never happened. Which also means that it still doesn't invalidate your experience. It still doesn't reduce your perspective or how you explain things to yourself or understood the meaning of things as they went down. It doesn't make you any less or your perspective or experience any less. But remembering that they are human and capable of making mistakes, and their first thought is to preserve their sense of self, when you meet with that retaliation as you're trying to explain that they hurt you, I'm hoping that this mindfulness will keep you from losing it and being traumatized all over again. I'm hoping that keeping this in the forefront of your brain helps you to maneuver through the conversation so you can say what you need to say, and either they pick up and walk with you or they just let it go and be like, oh no, that never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. And then you get to leave them where they are because you tried your level best. You gave it everything you have. This is why I teach. Human relations is tricky. Human relations is essential. Human relations is everything. It is how we get through the day. It's how we identify ourselves or define ourselves. It is how we find our place inside our house or in our community. It's how we learn more about what we like and what we don't like. The power of contrast is so strong in our human relationships. And this is why I think EQ is so important. It's not enough to know when someone's upset. It's more that you need to also understand that when they're upset, this is what their tendency is, because you've paid attention to them so long. And when you're upset, this is what your tendency is. And how do you make sure that your upset doesn't clash with their upset so that there is no good communication coming through? Instead, how do you learn to get through their defenses to speak to them so that you can actually come to a happy conclusion so that you can move forward? I hope this made sense, you guys. The fact that people are human and can make mistakes is so essential an idea that you would want people to consider that when you are being found fault with, just as much as I would love for you to do that for the people who have been hurting you. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, please drop them in the comments. I want to hear from you guys, but in the meantime, cut yourself some slack. And while you're at it, cut them some slack too. A lot of communication can be improved upon when you keep in mind the fact that they're just human. There is no guideline. There is no instruction manual. They're doing the best they can. And they might be beating themselves up over it, but they will never admit it to you, because admitting it means it's real, that other people can see what they see or see what they know. And that's terrifying to most people. I hope this makes sense, like I said. And if you have any questions, please contact me. And until the next episode, you guys, y'all take care. Bye.